There comes a moment in a woman's life when she grows weary of explaining herself to a world that was never listening. She begins to withdraw, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. This is not silence born from fear, but the kind that signals an inward turning, a return to self. The modern world demands constant output from women, emotionally, mentally, physically. She is encouraged to give, to please, to speak, to nurture, to explain, but she is seldom asked to simply be. And in this endless performance, she forgets that there is an inner voice that only speaks in stillness. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When a woman stops speaking to the noise around her and begins listening to the silence within, she awakens. She no longer clings to validation or the desire to be seen through the eyes of others. Instead, she begins to see herself, perhaps for the first time. Silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of depth. In the life of a woman, silence becomes a sacred threshold, a passage from external distractions into the richness of her inner world. In a culture that constantly demands expression, performance, and explanation, choosing silence is an act of radical self-possession. It is through this intentional quiet that a woman can begin to awaken, not to the world around her, but to the one within. When she steps into silence, she begins to hear what has long been buried beneath the noise, the subtle hum of intuition, the unresolved echoes of childhood wounds, the quiet longing of the soul. These inner voices have always been there, but they are easily drowned out by the chaos of modern life. Silence acts as a tuning fork, bringing her back into resonance with her authentic self. It is the mirror in which the unconscious becomes visible, where she can see herself not as others define her, but as she truly is. In this stillness, she begins to notice the internal patterns that shape her reality, the conditioned thoughts, the emotional loops, the inherited fears. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious rules our lives when left unexamined. Silence is the space where examination becomes possible. It is where a woman begins to differentiate between what is truly hers and what she has merely absorbed from the world. This awakening is not dramatic. It is subtle, soft, and yet deeply transformative. It is the shift from acting out of habit to responding with intention. Silence allows her to meet the parts of herself she has avoided. In this quiet, the shadow emerges, not to frighten her, but to integrate. All the denied feelings, unmet needs, and hidden desires come forward like forgotten children, not to overwhelm her, but to be embraced. This is the foundation of psychological wholeness. Through silence, she no longer needs to escape her discomfort. She learns to sit with it, breathe through it, and finally understand it. In doing so, she becomes intimate with her own depth. The world may interpret her silence as passivity or withdrawal, but it is neither. It is gestation. It is the soil in which the seeds of selfhood are planted. While others are busy performing for applause, she is being reborn from the inside. Her power is no longer dependent on visibility or validation. It begins to take root in something more enduring, in presence, in clarity, in truth. Silence becomes her sanctuary, a place she returns to again and again, not to hide from the world, but to remember her essence. As she honors this sacred space, a new kind of voice begins to rise within her, not loud, not desperate, but sure. This is the voice of inner knowing, the voice that does not shout to be heard because it no longer seeks permission to exist. When a woman begins to focus on herself, something profound begins to shift, not just in her circumstances, but in her energy. Her presence changes, her thoughts begin to settle, her body speaks more clearly. The frantic energy of constantly managing, fixing, pleasing, or proving starts to dissolve, and in its place comes a grounded calm. Self-focus isn't selfish, it's sacred. It is the conscious redirection of energy inward where true alignment begins. When her energy is scattered outward toward relationships that drain her, obligations that are rooted in guilt, or roles that no longer fit, she becomes disconnected from her center. She feels exhausted, emotionally bankrupt, and spiritually numb, not because she is weak, but because she is misaligned. As she withdraws from these external distractions and begins to nourish her inner world, the nervous system slowly softens. She begins to trust her instincts instead of ignoring them. She starts to choose rest instead of hustle, solitude instead of noise, boundaries instead of guilt. Every small act of self-loyalty becomes a quiet declaration that her energy matters. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. She stops pouring herself into empty vessels and instead tends to the fire within. That fire doesn't rage loudly, it glows with steadiness. It becomes her inner compass. Energetic alignment is not something others give to her. It is something she cultivates through devotion to her own well-being. She stops looking outward for clarity and begins to observe what rises within her when she is still. This alignment allows her to make decisions from wholeness rather than lack. She no longer moves from desperation or fear of being left behind. Instead, she moves from a deep internal knowing. People may not understand this shift. They may say she's changed, become distant, or hard to reach. But what they're really sensing is her return to self. She's no longer available for anything that pulls her away from her peace. In this space of alignment, she becomes magnetic. Opportunities come, not because she's chasing them, but because her energy is clear. Relationships begin to mirror the love and respect she gives herself. Life reorganizes around her inner frequency. She becomes a tuning fork, resonating at the level of truth, clarity, and self-trust. And in this vibration, what is false begins to fall away naturally. She doesn't need to beg, chase, or fight. The misaligned simply dissolve, and what belongs finds its way to her. This is not mysticism. It is energetic law. When she focuses on herself and preserves her own sacred rhythm, she lives in alignment with her design. Her mind, body, and spirit move together. Her yes is honest and her no is complete. She doesn't rush decisions, doesn't shrink to fit, doesn't dilute her needs to be accepted. She stands fully and completely in her own field of power. Transformation rarely announces itself with noise. It arrives quietly, like a whisper in the dark, and it demands solitude. In a world addicted to constant connection, endless stimulation, and the performance of identity, solitude can feel uncomfortable, even threatening. But it is within this discomfort that the deepest changes take root. Solitude is not isolation, it is intimacy with the self. It is the sacred container where all illusions are stripped away and only the truth remains. When a woman enters solitude, she does not lose herself, she meets herself. In solitude, the masks fall off. There is no one to impress, no one to perform for, no need to filter thoughts or shrink feelings. The rawness of her inner landscape is exposed. The fears she's buried, the grief she's delayed, the desires she's silenced, they all begin to rise. It is in this space that she starts to see the patterns she has repeated, the wounds she has carried, the beliefs that have shaped her. These revelations do not come through distraction or dialogue. They come in stillness, often when she least expects them. Solitude gives her the mirror of pure reflection. She is able to observe herself without distortion, to listen to the quieter parts of her psyche that are drowned out in the noise of everyday life. Carl Jung understood that true individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires an encounter with the unconscious. That encounter rarely happens in crowds. It happens in the silence of solitude, where a woman can sit with her shadow without judgment. The shadow is not the enemy, it is the repository of everything she has disowned: her power, her rage, her vulnerability, her intuitive gifts. In solitude, she can finally turn toward these parts with compassion. She begins to understand that transformation is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to the fullness of who she has always been, beneath the conditioning and the masks. Solitude is not passive. It is deeply active, even if nothing seems to be happening on the surface. The soul does its work in the quiet. Old identities dissolve, new insights emerge, the nervous system recalibrates, the mind learns to slow down, and the body starts to release tension it has held for years. This is the soil where new life begins to form, not in chaos, but in sacred stillness. The woman who emerges from solitude is not the same as the one who entered. She is less fragmented, more rooted. Her decisions are no longer based on fear or people-pleasing. Her presence becomes more grounded, more authentic. People may notice the shift in her, but they will not always understand it. That is because transformation is an inward phenomenon. The real work, the lasting change, does not come from external events, but from internal awakening. And that awakening begins when the world is quiet enough for her to hear her own soul speak. When a woman becomes whole within herself, the chaos around her begins to lose its grip. Wholeness is not a state of perfection, but a state of integration, a returning to all the lost, rejected, or ignored parts of herself and giving them a place at the table. She no longer views her wounds as weaknesses or her softness as a liability. She no longer sees her boundaries as barriers, but as sacred lines that define the shape of her truth. In this state of inner coherence, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. Her outer world begins to mirror the inner peace she has cultivated. Life, once erratic and unpredictable, starts to move with a rhythm that supports her, not undermines her. Natural order is not forced. It does not come from control, manipulation, or overthinking. It emerges when things are in right relationship with themselves, with others, with the environment. And when a woman is in right relationship with herself, when she honors her emotions, listens to her intuition, trusts her voice, and lives in alignment with her values, she becomes a vessel through which natural order flows. This is not magic. It is energetic coherence. The outer chaos many people experience is often a reflection of inner fragmentation, but when she is no longer fragmented, when she no longer abandons parts of herself to be accepted or loved, her energy stabilizes. From this place of wholeness, she no longer feels the need to chase people, opportunities, or outcomes. She understands that what is meant for her will meet her, not because she forces it, but because she is aligned with it. Her clarity becomes a filter. What no longer fits begins to fall away effortlessly, not with drama, but with peace. She no longer has to scream to be heard or fight to be seen. Her presence speaks for itself. Her alignment makes her magnetic. This magnetism is not rooted in performance, beauty, or status. It is rooted in the frequency of truth. Everything in nature seeks balance. Rivers find their path, roots grow toward nourishment, and seasons shift in perfect time. Likewise, when a woman lives from wholeness, the people and situations that are out of sync with her energy begin to fade. The right people, those who recognize her not as an object but as a soul, begin to appear. Opportunities that resonate with her deepest values begin to unfold, and challenges that once threw her into panic now become invitations for deeper growth. She is no longer thrown off by the temporary disorder of life because she is rooted in something more constant, the order within herself. This wholeness makes her a source of stability in a world addicted to speed and reaction. She becomes a tuning fork for harmony, not because she avoids conflict, but because she brings presence to it. Her life doesn't become perfect, but it becomes purposeful. Each experience, even the difficult ones, serve a role in the larger unfolding. She stops grasping and starts allowing. She stops fearing and starts trusting. And through this trust, life begins to arrange itself with quiet precision around her unwavering center. In embracing silence, self-focus, solitude, and inner wholeness, a woman no longer becomes a reaction to the world, but a powerful center of gravity within it. Her energy shifts, her choices deepen, and her life begins to reflect the truth she's reclaimed. She no longer chases alignment, she becomes it. In this state, everything that is truly meant for her begins to find its rightful place. Not through force, not through noise, but through presence, clarity, and the sacred return to herself.